Hi, we're here with Andrew Ehrensing from Microsoft in the US. He's in the public sector organisation as a solutions architect out of Chicago. Hi Andrew, how are you doing?
Hello, I'm doing quite well, thank you.
Great, so what can you tell us a little bit about what you do?
Sure, so I'm in the services organization for Microsoft based out of Chicago, but I work in our public sector organization, and as a solutions architect, what that means is that I provide both strategic vision for our people in the field, ensure that their readiness is up to date on our current UC products, as well as actually QA, and then helps in the sales fashion assist the sales organization with selling services engagements and QA those engagements to ensure that they're on the right track.
Fantastic. So it sounded like a background with unified comms and deployment, that sort of thing?
Correct.
Cool, so tell us some more. Yeah.
I have a long background in messaging, about 15 years or so with enterprise messaging systems, and for the past 5 years or so, a lot of our work around LCS, our live communication server, which was succeeded by Office Communication Server R1 and R2, and we recently announced this summer the next release of that product, Communication Server 14.
So from what I've heard about Communication Server 14, it sounds awesome. Can you tell us a little bit about it today?
Well, we'd love to. So for Communication Server 14, it's really the next iteration, as we said, of the voice platform. One caveat is that it's still in the pre-release stages, so everything we say is subject to change prior to RTM, of course.
Sure.
But our focus here really was to provide something that could provide the functionality or equivalent functionality of that of a PBX. So we're trying to give you a true enterprise voice capable solution and add things around or simplify your planning, set up deployment process, add additional voice functionality, and especially provide some high availability and site resilient features inside of that.
If I'm a customer, do I have to get rid of my existing PBX, or how does that work?
It varies. So if your PBX is nearing end of life, we'd love to have a conversation with you around whether or not CS14 can meet the requirements that you have around voice and telephony today. If your PBX is still going to be or several years in the support phase and you're not looking at retiring it, we can also look at coexisting with that. We're starting to add things around presence and conferencing and other features for your integration with your PBX functionality.
Great. Now you mentioned high availability being a feature.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. So we've added a couple areas. One is that with OCS, what we heard from customers is that the requirement to deploy a hardware load balancer can be somewhat challenging. There's a varying ports and protocols and configurations. There's the expense of having to identify and procure a load balancing vendor, etc. So we did some work in CS14 on the client side. So while you're running the CS14 or communicator client, the communicator client will determine what servers in your pool or your infrastructure are available and then leverage each one of those servers. So it'll try the server one. If that server is not available, it will fall back to the next one. And we even do that in a load balancing algorithm so that they don't all try server one first and then eventually fail to server 5, for example.
Sure.
They'll randomly select one of those servers and then go through an algorithm to determine when the next available server is. The endpoint for that is that the communicator client then can fail over to additional servers in the pool without having any additional network load balancer or hardware load balancer type solution. The other area is really around the ability for your branch offices to survive in the case of a central site failure or a WAN failure. So most organizations, telephony is pretty important, and if there's a link failure, they don't want that to impact, or a central site failure, that shouldn't really impact the operations at the branch offices. And so in CS14, working with our hardware partners, we have this concept of the Survivability Branch Appliance, or SBA. Basically, that allows you to have a remote site. Let's say you have 20 or 50 or a few hundred users at this location, but you want to deploy a CS14 pool or a large CS14 infrastructure there. You can have your CS14 infrastructure in your central site, and you deploy one of these survivable branch appliances in the remote site. As a result of that, there's both what we call a mediation server role. So normally users will operate and they'll be able to leverage the CS14 infrastructure to place voice calls or join conferences or send IM messages, for example. But in the case of a central site failure or a WAN link failure, we would then reroute their voice calls over the circuit switch network through the appliance itself. So your local telco in that area would provision some circuits, and those would be your failover solution in case of, like I said, either a link failure or a central site failure.
Fantastic. I'm guessing the integration story with Exchange 2010 and Office 2010 is all pretty good as well?
Oh, you would be, yeah, there's plenty of features in that area. One of the requested features, right, is the ability to do message waiting indicator or light up the phone voicemail icon when a phone occurs. We provide that natively in the product now. The integration with Exchange is very interesting. What we find internally at Microsoft is that the number of people who use their phone to check their voicemail, once we deploy a unified messaging type solution, drops into the 3 to 5% range.
Wow.
So once it goes into your Outlook client or OA or is available on your mobile phone, right, which has your email also, people just tend to check that voicemail. With Exchange 2010 also, we're giving you what we call voicemail preview, which means that when we attempted to do a transcription of the voicemail when it comes in, we will give you a speech to text copy of what we infer that voicemail is. It's not 100% accurate, but we say 70 to 80%. But what it gives you is the essence of what the person's trying to say. And with that, we're finding that that's often enough information. You'll know who called. We'll provide that information, right, with some enhanced caller ID capabilities. And we'll kind of we'll provide some context around what the person was saying or trying to say in that voicemail.
And it makes it searchable and archivable as well.
That is correct.
Yeah,
so now that voicemail becomes a text record in your mailbox. You can annotate that with additional notes if you want to, or you can just leverage that information to take whatever actions were requested in the voicemail, for example.
Fantastic. Okay, and we talked about deployment at the start, so ease of deployment, obviously a key.
Right. So one of the other areas is the concept of deploying OCS and CS is a little challenging. If we come from a messaging background, we're really focused on delivering or transmitting email messages. We have kind of a single area to plan for. With the CS14 and OCS products, what we really have is IM and presence, so there's an area or a modality there. We have the concept of voice calls, both peer-to-peer, voice calls to the PSTN. We have the conferencing aspects, there's the application sharing, and all of these have a different technical requirements around both infrastructure deployments and capabilities and hardware sizing, for example. So one of the things we've done is we released a planning wizard with 2007 R2 that asked you or interviewed you with a set of questions and then prepared topology for you. With CS14, we take this concept of the topology that comes out of the planning wizard, and we have something called the topology builder. So you will actually build your topology conceptually using the topology builder, and then once that's deployed, which will adhere to all of our guidance and recommendations, so you're in a fully supported deployment model, you just run the setup executable on each one of the server roles. It looks up its name and IP address that you defined in your topology builder, and will deploy all the respective components automatically for you there. So we've taken some of the difficulties out of that deployment process by ensuring that once you run setup, it will fall into line with what you've already defined first in your planning wizard and eventually in your topology builders. We give you a much easier setup and deployment process around being able to take something from what you want to do to having servers set up for that. In conjunction there, we've also introduced with CS14 full support for virtualization. So one of the common requests from customers for OCS 2007 is we'd like to virtualize some of these server roles.
Absolutely.
But we didn't support virtualizing server roles that had voice or video capabilities due to things like jitter and the latency involved with getting the information to the processor on time. We've done a lot of work with our virtualization vendors, so we fully support virtualizing on Windows Server 2008, R2, Hyper-V, as well as any virtualization vendor that falls under the SVDP or the Server Virtualization Validation Program.
Great.
So that gives us a supportability and a legal framework to assist with any virtualization issues that might arise. But now we support with CS14, all server roles can be virtualized. So you have a choice of virtualizing all of it, some of it, or none of it as you go down your deployment path.
Great. Well, fantastic. Thank you very much for giving us those insights into what's coming.
Thank you.
Check out Andrew tomorrow. He's got 3 sessions. Come and find out some more. Thank you very much.
Thank you.